It's recording.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to those of you in Zoom who are joining us online. This is our first event for the Data Science Speaker Series. This is our second year of hosting it, and I am so grateful to the 5 panelists that we have. 3 of them are in person, 2 of them you will meet on over Zoom. But they are former students in the Data Science Certificate Program, and we are going to get to hear from them. And the reason that they are our particular speakers is because they are actually published authors of the article, Students' Experience and Perspective of a Data Science Program at a 2-Year College. So that's pretty much the only slide I would like to share, except we'll go here. So again, you're going to hear from Mary, Jennifer, Marilyn, Juan, and Camilo, and they're going to answer a few questions. And then at some point we'll end the questions that we prepared, and then we'll have time for some question and answers, if that works out. And if you would like a link to the article, I will be happy to send out that link to anyone who needs it. I think it's on the flyer. If you found us here, you probably found the flyer. So you're welcome to take a look at it. They did an amazing job. And it's a long process to get published if you're not aware of that. And so they are incredible, all diverse experiences, and I'm so excited to hear from them. So let's see, and welcome to everyone over Zoom if you're just joining us. So I guess what we're going to do is we're going to take turns with the first question, which is, of course, the introductions. So this is the first question, and specifically, please introduce yourself. What did you study at MC, and what are you doing now? And we are going to start with Mary. So Mary, let me go ahead and pin you. And there you are.
Great, thank you. So my name is Mary Glantz. At MC, I studied for the data science certificate. Most of the classes I took there were in data science. And now I am the senior advisor and the acting director of the Center for Russia and Europe at the United States Institute of Peace.
Thank you. Jennifer, you are up next. So.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Johnson. At MC, I was in the Data Science Certificate Program. I didn't start out that way. I was just going to take one class, but then I got hooked and I finished the certificate. Currently, I am working as a therapist at a community mental health agency where I work with children and families.
Thank you. And Marilyn, you're up next.
I'm Marilyn Macy. And I studied the data science certificate program, but 25 years ago, I took Italian at Montgomery College. And after I finished the data science certificate, I started taking interior design classes. So I'm exploring all sorts of things.
Very well-rounded. And let's see, Juan, you are up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Nunez. I began my tertiary education at Montgomery College, where I completed an associate's degree in general studies more than 10 years ago. And then I transferred and got a BA and an MA in sociology in other universities. But then I came back to Montgomery College in 2018, where I began the data science certificate program. And my current title is I work for a private company called WRMA, and my title is data analyst. And I'm also a second-year PhD student in social welfare at the University of California in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Juan. And I would definitely say last but not least, Camilo.
Hi, I am Camilo. I studied math. I started doing an associate's in math here. And then thanks to Rachel, I went into the data science certificate too, and I finished that. And after doing that, I transferred into the University of Maryland, where I am finishing an applied mathematics undergraduate degree. So right now I'm a senior, I'm working on that, and I'm also it's my third year as I have two part-time positions outside of school. One at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, where I have been a data science intern for the last 3 years, and I also am a part-time data scientist at the National Institutes of Health.
Are you still considered an intern at NIST?
Yes.
It's been 2 years. Okay, thank you. All right, our next question. Why did you pick MC, data science program, and how has it impacted your career? And I guess we start with Jennifer first.
So I chose MC because I had just moved to the area, and I wanted to go back to school to become a therapist. So my history was as I started my career as a public defender, and then I got into community arts programs and a lot of healing and community healing processes. And I wanted to go into therapy because I saw so much trauma in our community and so much need for that, especially with kids. So for those programs, to get into graduate programs for that, you need statistics. And I hadn't taken statistics for like 20 years. I graduated from undergrad in 2003 and my statistics class by hand. So I came here to learn how to use programs in order to do that work. And so I took one class, I took the biostats class with Rachel, and it was incredible. And was honestly way more material than I got in any of the grad school stats classes that I took, honestly. And so then once I got hooked on that and I took a data visualization class, I saw the power of visualizations and how that can be used in some of my advocacy work that I do for equity for families and children. And so that, and once I was hooked on that, I just saw the richness of what having access to the tools and the languages of data and how much that's central to major decisions being made in the world today. And how that could be a tool that when it's free resource to communities could be a really powerful mechanism to get people to change language, definitions, terminology, access to power and resources. So that's why I decided to continue the program. And now my partner, who also works at NIST, she has enrolled in the program and is now taking it. Yeah.
The legacy goes on. Thank you. Marilyn, you're up next.
Well, I retired in October of 2020. And the last few years of my career as I finished off as a business architect. I just knew I wanted to go back to school and study all the things that I wanted to study that couldn't study when I was trying to get my degree way back when we were using sticks and rocks for statistics. And I've enjoyed my time at Montgomery College when I took Italian, and it's a great way to get a good education with accreditation, and inexpensive and convenient. And
Yeah.
well, the data science. Well, I was just looking through the catalog, and I ran across the data science. And I thought, okay, cool, and saw that the prereq was statistics, and they said I hated my statistics course when I took it as an undergrad, and I loved my statistics courses when I took it here.
I didn't pay them. I promise. I promise. I promise. Thank you, Marilyn. Juan, you are up next.
Hello. So I chose the certificate program at Montgomery College for a couple reasons. The first is that I knew I always wanted to do something in the social science, but I felt like my data skills weren't good enough at the time. I mean, I like statistics a lot, but all the data I used to get in my statistics courses were all clean, but that's, as we all know, that's not very realistic. So I needed more hands-on work with managing data, and the certificate program provided me that opportunity. And the second reason is more personal, is that I always enjoyed an academic setting, and between my master's and joining the certificate program, I felt kind of like a fish out of water. And so once I joined the certificate program and started meeting people like Rachel, it was a positive impact in my life. So yeah, that's, there's no alternative to than actually being enrolled in a program and going through a program. And yeah, after I completed the certificate program, my career really took off, I guess, in a positive sense, and my ability to work with data has improved to a point where I was able to, or improved after the program to a point where I was able to get the job that I currently have. So I'm very grateful for Montgomery College in that sense.
Yuan and Camilo.
I was studying math here, and it was a little bit of a mistake that I ended up taking biostat, because I I like to make tea, and I am very particular about the way I make coffee and tea. So I would weigh 5 grams of tea and 400 grams of water. And after 10 minutes, it wouldn't weigh 405 grams, but 408. So I was very upset about it, and I asked one of my professors if they knew the answer. And they were like, oh, you should take this class. It's called biostat. So I took it. Rachel, you never gave me the answer to the. Yeah. But yeah, so that's why I took it. But then when I realized that I could trick a computer into doing what I wanted it to do, it was very nice. And I did that with learning R and learning all the powerful numbers behind actually having data tell you something, or just realizing that it doesn't say anything. I really, really like that part. And that's why I ended up going to the data science certificate and finishing all of that too. And it has helped. I think that what helped me the most in those classes was realizing that it was never like a set of steps that you had to do, but it was always this is our goal, this is the data we will work with, go figure it out. And that's how I think everything is in data science, but the most important part is actually like knowing what you need to do before actually going to the computer and tricking it into doing it. So that was very powerful, and I learned that in the data science certificate.
So it's so interesting you say that, because I just was on a meeting with the Montgomery County Executive Office yesterday, and we're having talks about how we can expand our partnership. But one of the things that one of the colleagues there said was exactly that. Like, what data scientists need the most is to be able to start by defining what is the question, and then what are the steps to how you will be able to answer that question. So you said it exactly right. Well done.
Yeah.
You got an A. I get an F for not answering your question. All right, and then let's see, last but not least, Mary.
Thank you. So before this career, I was a diplomat, US diplomat, and one of my postings was in Estonia, where they're very tech savvy. They invented Skype, and they'll tell you that at every meeting. And I went to all these meetings with people from NIST and other places who were coming to work with the Estonians, and I had no idea what they were talking about. So I started taking some classes online to figure out what they were talking about with data and computers, and eventually realized I needed to perhaps take a statistics course. So I signed up at Montgomery College. During that course, I looked at the catalog, found other courses on data, and I found each of them so enjoyable that I just continued until I got their certificate. I would say, in addition to everything that my colleagues have said about what data science has meant for my career, I think one of the most important things is the data literacy it gives you, the ability to understand what other people are doing with data. So in my current job, for example, I work a lot on the Ukraine war, and we had a group come in advocating for more support for Ukraine, and they did this data science proof that if we did not provide more assistance to Ukraine, Russia would invade Poland. Now, anybody who studied data science knows that's absurd. And so I actually got to go through their work and help them figure out what they were really trying to say and what their data was actually telling them. And that's all because of the data science work I did at Montgomery College.
Thank you. Oh, okay, so we are on to question number 3, and that is, what is your favorite part about working with data and why? And Marilyn, you are up first.
Well, the first thing that comes, it's synthesis. You have all of these discrete little pieces of information, and you organize them and you catalog them and you analyze them and you visualize them, and you get an answer or an insight. Sometimes the answer isn't what you were expecting, and many times the answer is you've got another question. But it gives you a new look at truth, and a new way to look at truth.
Thank you. Juan, you're up next.
So my favorite part about working with data is mostly that, you know, and we've kind of touched on this topic already, is that I'm better able to make sense of the world and society with it. You know, like for example, one of the courses that I'm gonna TA for this quarter as part of my PhD program is called Using Data to Learn About Society. So already statistics courses have started, like introductory statistics courses are starting to shift towards the data field. And so I really appreciate that, of being able to come up with questions and answer them and have proof, and then also and thinking more high level, just thinking that the findings of all the work I do using data, and then the findings of, you know, the work we've done as a team and with other teams, is like, this will be part of our legacy, that, you know, this is going to be part of, you know, the evolution of what we learn in, you know, as a society together. So that's I guess my favorite part of working with data. And also what Marilyn just said, that, you know, you find a lot of truth when you work with data. So I guess it's very rewarding, and that's why I'm still working with data, and hopefully I will forever.
Thanks, Juan. Camilo.
I think I like the freedom of asking questions, answering questions. But also, I personally really like what most people, or many people, find boring. And I really like organizing data, making it more useful to others. Because I think of it in a way that, say, having an organized kitchen, organizing your kitchen is not very fun. But if you go and cook in an organized kitchen, you'll be more efficient, and you'll probably cook better, let's say. So I think that working with data and making sure that it's organized, it's in a format that is easy to share, in a format that it shows where it came from, and it provides more access for different people to work with it. I think that's my favorite part, and to just make data access easy and organized is my favorite part, because then it's not that it's just up to someone else to make decisions and look at the data, but I'm making someone else's job easier. So I think that's a very important part, and some people might find it boring. I find it really fun.
Thanks, Camilo.
It helps if you're a little OCD.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, and Mary, you are up next.
So for me, my favorite part of working with data is it's the exploratory data analysis. I love just playing with the data and to answer questions, and then discovering what other questions I might want to ask of that data. And it's actually, it becomes the most challenging part for me too, because I never know when to stop. And this was part of my problem in the classes, is I would just keep asking, and the document would get longer and longer and longer, because every time I got an answer, it provoked more questions. And so that for me, it's like a giant puzzle. That for me is the most fun part of data analysis.
Thanks, Mary. And Jennifer.
I think I want to pick up on what people are saying, because it's almost like data is like the footprints of humans in the world. Like, you can see the patterns of systems, you can see the patterns of what we do, why we do it. Just like Camilla was saying, like, here's a start point, here's where we're trying to get, and you can be creative about how you get to that end point. And what's going to influence that creativity is your perspective, your background, your identity, your access to resources, your, like, there's so many different things that are going to impact that creative process for each person, that to provide clean data to people and open source it, there is like an abundance of creativity that people could have. And there's an abundance of solutions that people could have to make the world something that's more humane for us all. So like even what Mary was saying, like that example of being in that room where decisions are being made about Russia and Ukraine, and people are misreading the data and not understanding the data and skewing it in a certain way to fulfill a certain agenda, a certain messaging that they want, a certain outcome that they want to accomplish. And how often are those decisions being made with data as the justification, but there's a particular way in which that data came about. There's a particular way in which that data is being presented, and there are only so many voices being included in what data is being used and how it's being defined, and what we see in it, what we pick out in it, what patterns we see in it, what questions, like the way Mary described, like it's almost like a grounded theory of research, that the questions emerge out of the patterns of the data that you find. So I think that there's a lot of room. Like what I find fascinating about working with data is I see all of these possibilities, and I see the way things are skewed, and I see how truth, like that aspect of truth, is something that if you view it with a microscope, or you view it from way out, or you view it from this perspective or this perspective, truth looks very different. And how can we start to talk to each other through our understanding of data, through what the data means to us, through our interpretations of that, in a way that can make us more connected instead of more disparate and more dissonant from one another. Yeah.
Jennifer?
Yeah.
So that gets us to our fourth question before we open it up. So this question is, how do you see how you use data evolving with the data science field? And we're going to start with Juan.
This is actually, I think, the most difficult question, because it requires thinking about the future and thinking about, you know, the evolution of a field that, you know, could go any way, you know. And so I think the way I use data will be impacted mostly by like the growth of AI and machine learning, which, you know, in a way is amazing that at Montgomery College, at the certificate program, we get to learn about how AI and machine learning works. So when ChatGPT came out, I wasn't flabbergasted like a lot of people, you know, like I kind of know what's going on under the hood, you know. And so I do think that in the data science field is evolving very fast with AI. I mean, I remember one week in Rachel's class, in the visualization class, when we were learning ggplot functions, another student presented, and he found like another program that is point and click basically, and created these like really complex ggplot visualizations. And then you could see the code that it was a really long chunk of data, and you know, he just did it in 3 minutes, whereas if I had to write that, it would have taken me like you know, like a couple hours or something. And so, you know, I think that a lot of people are starting to use AI and machine and ChatGPT and all of those tools to write code now. They just tell the they just write it like write me for a regression for all these variables, and the ChatGPT writes the code, and it's easy. So I think that's one way that in the future, like it will be undoubtedly easier to just use these tools probably, but that doesn't take away the fact that it's important for me as a data analyst to know exactly how we got there, or not exactly, but have a very good idea of how we got there. And so I personally haven't gotten on the ChatGPT boat yet, like and I haven't used it for my academic or professional work yet, but there's a possibility that one day I will use it. And so I'm kind of more of a wait and see right now, and just I'm continuing to enjoy solving puzzles through coding, and and continuing to enjoy the impact that my work has. So yeah, that's I hope that's like a good. I can't really say other how else that my use of data is gonna change really.
I think this was the one that you set us up for this question though, right, Juan?
Yeah,
Oh.
unfortunately.
But I like the way you use the word puzzles. I like that. I hadn't thought of it that way. All right, and so Camila, you're up next.
This is the one I'm most excited about. I use, I don't know if everyone in the room has heard of GitHub Copilot. So it's pretty much GitHub is where all the most of the code gets shared either with the open community or within teams. And it's owned by Microsoft, and they have trained models, language models, on these vast amounts of data. And it's like your co-pilot. It helps you program. And it's amazing. It's scary, but it's scary good. And I use it every day. And I think it all comes back to having a clear goal, because again, I know what I need to do with these scripts that I'm writing. I know what I need to do with these sets of images that I'm working on. So having these co-pilot with me, just not having to write the actual word, but just help me write the word, I think it's very powerful, and it makes more efficient programmers that then can focus on other tasks. Also say, I'm very lazy. So when I have to
here to hear that.
yeah, no. I'm very lazy when I program. And say I have a list that has A, B, C, D, then item 2, A, B, C, D, and I need to remove item C of H1. I know how to do it, but it will take me time. But I know what I need to do, and I write it in English, and it's done. So that's not the hard part. The hard part is writing it in English. And I remember when I was your learning assistant, Rachel, that was our top thing. Tell me in English what you're trying to do. And it was very hard for students to come up with an English sentence of, I'm trying to analyze these and these from this part of the data. So I don't think it's going to turn into just we let Copilot be the pilot, but it's definitely a very useful tool, and it will help all of us go back to, well, some people think all of these are boring tasks. No, just some of them, but go back to some not boring tasks. But personally, I really hope people move from Python to Julia faster.
Shameless
Yeah.
promotion for Julia.
Yeah, but other than that, I'm very excited about the whole language models helping.
Thank you, Camilo. Mary, you are up next.
So one of the things I'm really excited about is the natural language processing and the improvements in natural language processing. In my line of work, which is analyzing Russian behavior, Russian and other countries' behavior, sentiment analysis can be really key. So for example, I did a sentiment analysis of the foreign policy priorities. They put out a foreign policy document every few years in Russia. So I put them all in the computer and analyzed them to see whether they were becoming more aggressive or less aggressive, and things like that. That was a relatively simple model. Now with cloud computing and bidirectional models and the amount of trained models that are trained massive amounts of language, it's a lot easier to get more sophisticated analysis of text. And so that's one of the things I'm really excited about and can actually see using more. In addition, I have used ChatGPT to help me with coding, like they're talking about. It really makes it a lot easier when you want to do something relatively simple and you know what it is, but you don't want to have to look up how to code that particular task.
I just have to pause for a second because this was such an interesting thing. So when Mary was in my data visualization class, I had a tutorial on data mining. I'm sorry, it was mining for tweets when Twitter still existed. And so Mary was one of the few who's ever taken on this because it was an optional tutorial, and she was mining for tweets in Russian. Didn't you figure it out how you were looking for the connection of tweets about Vladimir Putin back then? And this was like years and years ago.
Yeah, it was tweets that referenced Putin and who and what was referenced most closely with Putin in it. Turned out at the time it was like Alexei Navalny because he was doing a lot of work on it. But yeah, it was in Russian, and there are plenty of. That's the other exciting thing about natural language processing is really it's almost language neutral, and there are a lot of libraries now in Python. No offense to Julia there, Camilo, but there are a lot of language libraries, so you can do this analysis in foreign languages, even if you don't necessarily speak those languages, though it certainly helps when you're trying to sort out which words are junk words and don't need to be considered.
Thanks, Mary. Jennifer.
For me, for the future, I'm a therapist and I'm working with kids. So when we see the articles about social media and the impact that it's having on youth mental health, and we see the increasing suicide rates, especially among marginalized populations, queer populations, trans populations, kids of color, all the intersections. I'm seeing that and seeing it in their faces when they're in front of me. So I'm very curious to see how we can humanize our technology. There's a great center called the Center for Human Technology. And there is an amazing person that leads it. And he talks a lot about where are we using metrics for profit and increasing our resources over humanity and over our human species, over how we're doing, what we're doing to the planet, all of that. So part of what I did, because of my public defender past, part of what my project was for the Capstone project was to look at bail amounts that were being given. And right now, algorithms are being used in some states to determine what bail amount someone should have. And the argument for them is basically that the algorithms are reducing bias that people have. And we all know that's not true. So I'm gonna say, I recommend this book.
Oh, yes. Great book.
This person, Bruja Benjamin, is incredible. And she really breaks down like how race influences a lot of the algorithms and how biased things actually are. But it's being put forth as something that's going to actually neutralize it. So it's saying, oh, it will increase our human rights to have algorithms determining things. But that's not actually the case. But a lot of people believe that because there's not information out there. So I think in order for people to have more access to information about how the algorithms are being used to make really important decisions. And also, like a big part of what I wrote about in the article was about the ethics of people who are working with data. And she actually, I listened to a talk with her where she really broke down ethics in a brilliant way to say, at what point is ethics used to justify normative behavior? Which I think there's a lot of richness in that conversation to dive into. But I think, how do we hold ourselves accountable? It's the everyday people working in data that are writing the algorithms, that are putting data analysis together. How many people are going to their jobs, clocking in, clocking out, heads down, and not really thinking about what they're contributing to? And so how can we, like Paulo Freire, how can we raise our consciousness, our critical consciousness amongst us, amongst kids, amongst everybody in our society to be able to communicate about these things in a knowing way, especially because they are shaping so much of our lives. Like people are dying over social media. You know, there are people being denied loans. The inequities are just increasing. So how can we take these tools, which are very powerful tools, and transform them to be able to be used in ways that could actually bring us together and bring us back to a place of treating each other well and not mistreating each other. So that's where, and that for me is in the youth. So let's clean all the data, let's give it to the kids and see what they create.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah.
And Marilyn.
Well, I'm retired and I'm doing other things.
Great to end with this question.
I will say that if these tools had been available 30 years ago, I would have had a very different career. I would have made different career choices. When I started off, my first job out of college, I worked for a subcontractor on the space shuttle, on their backup flight data system database. It was a series of linked flat files, and we dealt with things in kilobytes. You know, I would change a disk drive in a Data General Eclipse that was the size of a spare tire and weighed 20 pounds and held 10 megabytes. Okay, nowadays I can put a terabyte in my pocket. So it's an entirely different world. And if I am toying with the idea of going and getting a graduate degree in data science, just for the fun of it, because I had so much fun in the data science program. But I'm also very intrigued with the ethics questions, because there is so much out there and there is so much opportunity for change and growth for the human race.
Thank you. Wow. So that actually is the end of our prepared questions we had. I do want to just say one thing. This is just kind of off script, that if you weren't here right at the very beginning, I'll just say brief something again. So these 5 presenters, our 5 panelists, were students from the Data Science Certificate Program, but you can see they come from very vast entry points, I'll say, and they also have very vast and different exit points and where they're headed. And the diversity of the students we have is, I don't think we could have done it any better. And this was relatively random sample of students. I will say relative, and I'll just say that of students who have graduated from the program. And the way that these students were selected or were invited, I'll say, to do the authoring of this article is I said, hey, would anyone like to be a part of this? That's about how it happened. And then there were about 10 who started to show initial interest. And then by the time it actually came down to the hard work that they put into it, these amazing 5 students were the ones who put it in. You can see why. I mean, they have a lot to say. They have a lot of thought about the program. So one more time, I thank you all for not only being a part of the program, but being willing to write about your perspective and then take the time and energy that it took to get it published. And again, if you haven't read that article, please do jump in, and it's in the flyer, but they did an amazing job. And I just wanted to keep going with that ethics piece, since that's going to be my question to you all right now, is that a huge part of the paper was about ethics. And I know, Jennifer, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna segue right from that, is that do any of you, and I'll let anyone take off from their presenters, have anything more they'd like to say about ethics? And maybe since you've written your piece from the article, if there's anything you wanted to add to that, because it's such a huge element of what we're talking about now in data science and artificial intelligence. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, sure. I'd just say that one of the things that I really appreciate learning about, and that is actually, when I talked earlier about the importance of data literacy, the ethical aspect of it is just as important as understanding what the charts mean and what they don't mean. because you do learn, and we did learn a lot in your class in particular, where we did a lot of reading and discussion on this, about how data is used or misused, sometimes unintentionally. It reflects the biases in society. And you have to be aware of that. The questions that data is asked, even when you supposedly clean data so that it doesn't reflect racial or other type gender bias, whatever, often it reflects it through other variables that you're not considering. And so being able to understand all that and the ethical challenges then of data was something that I really took away from the courses at Montgomery College.
Thank you. Your comment leads me to think of that image, Ouroboros, if anyone's ever heard of it. It's the head eating its own tail, right? That's kind of the idea of what data and bias can do to itself. Yeah, thank you.
Going off of that too, and connected, I think, from a psychology standpoint, like a lot of what people are discovering with a lot of the social media and what gets the clicks, because of our survival mechanisms, we are pulled to click on things that could bring us fear, that could arise the sensation of danger in us, so that we are preparing ourselves for the future so that we can survive that circumstance. And this person that runs the Center for Humane Technology, in a speech, his name is Randima Fernando. He had this great analogy where he said, if aliens were looking down at the planet and they looked at highways and humans were driving by an accident, every human is looking at that accident, right? So what if the aliens were like, you know, humans really like accidents. Let's create a world of traffic accidents for people, because this is what we go to. This is what we click. It's part of our innate survival mechanism to go to that point. So that's what social media is driving off of, is what will we click, not what do we choose from our consciousness level, especially because it's happening so quickly. And it's in those moments, like if you look at the implicit association test, if anybody's ever taken that, you know that those decisions that you make in a split second about bias, about discrimination, about what we are pulled to emotionally, it's not necessarily what we would choose if we were given time and space to be able to sit with that information. So I think that is one aspect of it. And part of the reason that is going that way is because we are using the metrics and the values to make those decisions. Right now it's businesses, corporations that are going for profit. And that's what's being used at the end of the day, is what the bottom line is, not how is this affecting the mental health of our society and the divisiveness of our society. And so I think that often we talk about these issues in very high level forms, right? And so it's really easy to be like, they are doing this, they are doing that. And there's not as much self-reflection. And I think engaging with data in a self-reflective way of how am I contributing to this? How am I in this moment? How am I engaging in a conversation? How am I making my choices at work? How, when I have a supervisor pushing me to do something I know is not right, or that is contributing to something that I know I don't want to contribute to, at what point is that pressure point for me that I give into that? And how are we each in different positions of safety and security and access to resources to be able to resist that pressure when that comes up? And I think all of those human issues and relationship issues are part of the ethics of how coding is happening with the algorithms that are being written today, how decisions are being made in companies about what priorities we're using to make those decisions and not. So I think that like the ethics discussion is very meta, but it's also very personal. And I think if we don't have that layered discussion of like, how do these things show up in me as a person? How do these things show up in us as a small group? How does it show up as a larger group? And then how does it show up in places like law, policy, actual big corporate monies being moved around? Like all of that needs to be talked about and thought about when we're thinking about the ethics part, I think. Yeah.
Anybody else in the panel want to contribute? Juan?
Yeah. So, you know, I think that the systems perspective that Jennifer is talking about is extremely important, that we think about each layer of society and how these decisions impact the individual, the community, you know, and so on. But, you know, personally, you know, when I did the final presentation for the certificate program, I don't know if you remember, Rachel, but I did this visualization using the police data from Montgomery County that basically you could see that there was a significant difference in the amount of traffic stops where the driver was a person of color, you know, like, and you would see a large increase in the nighttime. And so that was, I guess, you know, I appreciated being able to demonstrate that, but I also at the same time felt kind of responsible for taking action to stop that injustice, basically. So that, I think, if we're going to use data ethically, we have to use, first of all, a critical lens if we're in the social sciences. And second, there has to be some sort of action attached to our findings. So it's good to demonstrate that there are differences between people. It's good to demonstrate, bring about that we need to have change. But we actually, as part of our work, we, in my opinion, or for me at least, like I need to have a vision of how this can be corrected, or who to talk to about how to make sense of this, so that we can come up with a solution to problems that are affecting the cohesiveness of society, which creates, in my opinion, and this is my research, community safety goes hand in hand with social cohesion. So that, I think that, ethically, that we need to think about, that data doesn't speak for itself, and that we have to take a really critical lens when we are analyzing data.
Thank you, Juan. Anybody else?
I think that it's much harder to solve the problem of biases in algorithms by just blaming it on the programmer or the company who's publishing it. And there's definitely, we have to regulate it in any way. Say, imagine, NIST is not a regulatory agency, but what if NIST created a sample database of faces, and every published face recognition algorithm has to perform at least 98% of these on these databases. Otherwise, it cannot be published. A lot of things are regulated like that. Food is regulated. So things that will be very important and will be important in decision making, they should be regulated, and not just any company could release a face recognition algorithm. So I think there's definitely a lot of things, starting with the fact that we don't understand deep learning models. So I don't even know if it's going to be like in 10 years, 20 years, it's going to be like, oh, remember when we thought deep learning was the future? I don't know. But I think using data gives us an opportunity of being more transparent, but it's definitely not happening. So it's harder. It's very hard.
Well, even building the standards can have bias in them.
Yeah.
So, it's, as you said, Ouroboros.
That is the same for today. Truth in Ouroboros. So we have about 10 minutes left, and so I wanted to open it up to anyone here in front of us or over Zoom if they have any questions for any of the speakers.
I was very interested in hearing Juan's data visualization project about Montgomery County. And I'm a professor in the history department. And I wonder if you all have like a bank of data resources that people, like if other professors wanted to leverage students' data work to kind of supplement lectures or what have you, if that exists. Because that's something like what Juan said, I would absolutely think I could see ways to incorporate it in my history courses.
So I'll answer first and then I'll let Juan answer. I'm not going to speak for Juan,
Right.
but one of the one of the things we instill in kind of our data science courses is all about sharing open, open source code, open source of what we're presenting and things like that. So many of my students, I've kept track of their projects, but not all of them. And I would say Juan was our first graduate of the data science program. So Juan, I don't have yours. I'll let you finish my sentence.
Luckily, it's published on GitHub, where you're able to see, and these data are open source, right? Rach? I mean, I haven't checked the Montgomery County data, the Data Montgomery website in a while, but it should still be there. So you can take my code that I published on GitHub and run it on newer data and see if these disparities are still present. So, and then maybe if we can get data from the past, we can use this code and see like a time series of what's been going on basically, and how this injustice is either growing or decreasing. And there's been a lot of talk that the COVID-19 pandemic actually decreased disparities, but I haven't seen. One of the projects I'm working on is actually on this topic and actually using data to see if there was actually a decrease in disparities in the United States. So Rachel, I'll share with you all the work I did while I was at MC, so that
Remember
yeah.
Professor Hammond, who is here, and he also mentioned that he, I believe, still has your project as well. So woohoo.
Data order, right?
And yes, so Data Montgomery has right now over 230 data sets about our county. So a lot of our capstone students will use that data to do their projects over the semester. Not all of them, but yes, so that exists. So if you contact me, we can get you connected with that. Thank you. And by the way, Mary has a PhD in history. So there you go. And again, that shows the diversity of the backgrounds of students in the program.
I wanted to mention one last thing about something Rachel mentioned and that's that, when I think about data, and one of the things I appreciated the most about the Montgomery College program is that they do stress that we should use open source data, that everything should be transparent, and that we should continue to be able to share our findings and our knowledge through these open source software like R and the Data Montgomery initiative and all of that. So I just wanted to emphasize how important that is, and I'm gonna run with it basically. If I do get to teach a class one day, it's gonna be full open source, and that's how I feel. And I learned that from Rachel. So thank you, Rachel.
We have another question from the chat. This is Mike Alfaro who wrote, and this goes to anyone. How would you go about building a strong portfolio to showcase or impress hiring companies? Also, what programming languages do you primarily work with other than Julia? That wasn't what he said. Anyone want to answer that?
I can if nobody else wants to, but I don't want to monopolize the
You're actually more in that space, I think.
Right. So I think GitHub is an extremely important resource for anyone that's trying to work in the data science, data analysis field, because and when I applied for jobs right after my completing the certificate, I would put the GitHub at the top of my CV, like that they know like what I've done. And also what I did is I put a lot of how-to like little tutorials on my GitHub, kind of to give something back basically, like how to do a regression in R, how to do a regression in Python, how to do a regression in SPSS, like that anyone can use my GitHub as a resource. And So I think that would be a really good thing to add to your portfolio is a GitHub account where you have all your, or you have, you know, a strong showcase of what you can and what you can do. So what was the rest of the question?
Also, what programming languages do you primarily work with?
So I primarily work with R. That's my #1 program, and then Stata, SPSS, and Tableau. Those are my main programs, and together they form a very strong base for everything I need. You know, there's some things that SPSS does better than Stata. You know, even though R does everything, sometimes it's kind of, maybe I should use ChatGPT when I think about it to do my R, because it can be very time consuming and difficult to figure out some issues.
And
But yeah, thank you for the question.
And I'm going to actually direct this one to Camilo because Camilo is a senior thinking about that. So what are you doing?
Yes, I think that GitHub is one of the highest priorities, and having a couple of projects that are of your own, also having contributed to open source projects is a really good thing to show. And the main languages I use is sadly Python. But I think it's come to the point. I remember I grew up in Colombia, and they used to tell me when I was studying English that it was now like, before 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was like, oh, so do you speak English? No, but now it's not. Okay, you speak English and what other languages? So I feel it's come to that with Python. Now, if you say you're a data scientist or you're a programmer, I'm like, okay, oh, so you're writing Python and what else? Because it's just assumed that you will know Python. In my experience in the data science part of the world where I have been, has been like that. And it's undeniable that there's a lot of resources for Python, and it works very well, very slowly, but very well.
That was a plug for Julia, by the way.
Oh, Python's not a bad language, it just doesn't have a good IDE. RStudio is a really nice IDE.
It is, but once you make VS Code your own, it's good. So I think, yeah, that's GitHub is #1. We are top priority.
Thanks for that question, Mike. It is 3:58, and if I start another question, we'll keep going past 4. So I'm going to say that one more thing. There are so many people I want to thank right now. So thank you, Jennifer, Camilo, Marilyn, Mary, and Juan. You guys are incredible. I'm also grateful to all the faculty who have taught them, who are here in Zoom or here in this space. Thank you to Dean Nash for letting us do these fun events. And thank you, Atul Roy, for this amazing camera that we're using today, because this made it wonderful. So thank you. And wait, there's more. I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so if anyone would like to connect with any of our presenters, you would probably, if you can't find them, you can just find my email and then I can connect you to any of them. That would be a great way to do that. And I think that would be it for today. So thank you everyone again for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Juan. I'm so
Thank
sad.
you.
Bye. So wonderful to see you. Good luck with everything. I know you're busy.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And
Thanks, this was a lot of fun.
Much. Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
It was great to see you. Bye-bye.
Oh,